hopefully they'll be theatrical again soon. We put it out on platforms. We do educational VOD, or educational and grassroots strategies, and we also do foreign sales. So that would be under sort of the distribution. Production is production. Do you want me, and so specifically what I missed, do you want me to launch into that? What am I missing? So mostly what I am missing is one, movie theaters. Would love to go into it. I know they're starting to open, but just the idea of being in a theater is very exciting. I'm in LA, so we might be a little bit behind some of your other territories. I miss Amazon taking documentaries indiscriminately. So if people I'm assuming many of the people already know that about 2 weeks ago, Amazon stopped taking documentaries. And I don't know that we haven't discovered how it's been restabilized yet and what they will be taking, although we're knocking on the door. And of course, gatherings like festivals and things like that. That's probably what I missed the most in the last year.
Yeah. Then we'll go into each one of these and more elaborately. So let's go to Erica and have her introduce herself.
Yeah, I think you made a really good introduction earlier, so thank you, Nora. Yeah, like Nora said, I, along with Claire, work on Flixer, which is a platform that focuses on women-led stories, with made by women and for women, and it's really about giving women a platform to tell their stories where otherwise it would be hard to get their stories told. So my background actually started in probably more programming, and then moved into acquisitions, and then went into distribution side, and now with Flixer, it's kind of back in the acquisitions again. Yeah, what I miss about pre-COVID is, just the gathering of people. I think the last film I watched before the lockdown happened in Sydney was I think Jojo Rabbit in cinemas, and just that collective experience. There was one scene in particular where everyone in the audience, I mean, spoiler alert for people that haven't watched it, but there was one scene where, the whole audience gasped, and you're not going to get that experience, watching it at home. So I think that collective experience of being in a cinema is, missing, and that collective experience of being, at an event, or, seeing a gig, and, being with people with humanity is, what's really missing. I think that's what I'm missing most from pre-COVID times.
Jordan?
Same here. I miss my international tribe, my international film tribe. A lot of what I do is connect international filmmakers with domestic resources for sales and distribution in the US. So I encounter a lot of international filmmakers from all over the world who are not always able to, move through the very difficult North American distribution machinery. But I miss them. I miss my international tribe. That I normally I would be seeing them in Berlin, in France, in Locarno, and this past year I'm holed up in a house in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I miss the international tribe.
Yeah, that's interesting, because for the festival this year, I had done a cafe, morning cafes. We were having every day. I said to myself, I am going to make the effort to be there every morning. Well, I'm going to take the time to drink my coffee. Might as well do it with everybody else there. From 10 to 10:45, we were getting together and trying to create that atmosphere of at least the feel that we are at a film festival. Because otherwise, if you were only relying on these panels and things, it's only the people who are participating in the panel that can come or are coming. Whereas when you open it like that, somebody might drop in, somebody might drop out. It's just like in a real festival situation. You walk into a room and you go, oh, so-and-so is here. You strike a couple of words, a conversation with them, and then you move on to go to your screening and so on. Well, we are all missing that, and so are we. We are missing all of you coming to New York. But the good side and the bad side, I always like to mention that. The good side is that we have been able to talk to all the filmmakers, whereas before we were only interviewing or having Q&As with the filmmakers who happened to be able to come to New York. So that is one major good point. So maybe we should address a different. Of course, we all know that the theatrical situation is suffering, and Beth mentioned something about documentaries. Do you want to, let's first of all concentrate on one genre or one way, let's concentrate on documentaries and then go into the difference between short films and feature films, take turns and so on. And then if you want to go more into general terms in terms of what are the new platforms, what are the new trends that are happening, so that we can have an inkling of what's happening. Feel free, I'm not gonna call names, so just jump in. I'm not gonna point out who should speak next.
So I'll start with, I think, the topic of documentary distribution. And what we've seen in the last year and what we forecast for the future. That's where I'll start. I mean, it's hard to get a read on sort of the COVID consumption. I mean, even based on my own consumption, I'm doing a lot of escapist, content consumption. So, I think in the last month or two, people have sort of picked up and going back to sort of willing to tackle issues. I think there was a big shift, obviously, here in the States especially for people who are financing and looking for content, to look for stories of people of color, rightfully so, that were created by people of color. So true, authentic stories. And I think that energies in both documentary and narratives, is focusing there. And of course, the feedback we're hearing, and I'm assuming other people are hearing, in terms of like production and financing, is we're looking for uplifting stories coming out of COVID. So. I mean, I think documentaries have played a staple of what people were watching. I don't know how many new films were acquired and or put out in the last year. I don't have a sense of that. I mean, not a lot from our perspective. I mean, regular work, but it was hard to get the attention of people who are acquiring, from the bigger platforms, because everybody was bailing water out of their boat for the first 6 months, especially here in LA and California. It's been a rough ride. And there's been so much going on that, it's been hard to focus on the sort of business aspect. But again, I think things have really opened up in the last few weeks. We're seeing a lot of activities and conversations happening, which is hopeful for documentarians and other films as well.
Yeah, that's really good to know. So I'm assuming that all of you do documentaries, right? Am I not correct in saying that, Erica? Flixa also picks up documentaries.
Yeah. And I think in Australia in particular, there's a need now to see films that were, or documentaries, just content in general that maybe we haven't really had a chance to see because we haven't been in cinemas, and because everything is streaming, you're getting access to more things from all over the world. I mean, like you said, this film festival in itself has reached more people and has content from all over the world. So we're lucky in that way that we've been able to rearrange how we showcase content. So yeah, in Australia in particular, we're really looking for content from everywhere. We're excited to see things from different communities, different countries. There's been a lot of talk about, now that big studios have taken away content from local platforms in Australia, we're more open to seeing content from local producers as well. So yeah, where usually it would take a big network in Australia to showcase something like that, it's now available on different streamers. So yeah, we're looking at that kind of stuff too, a lot of local content and a lot of content from local providers. Yeah.
Jordan, about documentaries.
Just what specifically, for example, just in terms of how I've been working?
Yes, I know you also had a preference for narratives in your case, but does your platform offer a choice of documentaries, or if you do, then what kind of documentaries you look for or attract you more?
Yeah, I definitely take documentaries. Right now, I'm in the process of releasing a feature documentary called Sisters with Transistors. And
Yeah.
it's about women in electronic music, and it tracks the history of different women who have been overlooked in the music industry, specifically in the electronic music industry, which, as you know, is very cis male dominated. So this documentary is a kind of an example of a kind of documentary that I would want to work with. It taps into an existing community, which is both women in science, women in music, but also musicians in a very general level, right? So there's quite a big community that you can draw from with a documentary like this, and you can do different kinds of outreach with marketing and sales and distribution when you have a film that taps into all these different communities. And there's a lot of crossover between communities as well. So yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say I personally I like fiction, and I like the process of watching filmmakers put together and interpret reality through fiction, and the creative elements and acting that it involves, the different art forms. But I think documentaries can do that as well.
Yeah.
Specifically hybrid documentaries. I watched a few films this year that they mixed fiction with documentary touches, and I kind of like that. But I sort of like, films that are playing around and interpreting reality, and documentaries can do that as well.
Actually, the documentary you just described does have that aspect to it. It's not like a hardcore talking heads and going into the details and bringing up statistics and stuff like that. It, because of the music, because of all those elements, it does have an aspect that where the entertainment value is also respected. And that is something that we also at the Socially Relevant Film Festival look out for when we are programming. We don't want, because it's all these social issues, and this year especially we have 12 different social issues ranging from climate change to disability to empowering women to forms of protest, genocide, immigration, indigenous populations, human trafficking, homelessness, you name it. It's like LGBTQ, youth and children, race was a big one this year. And if you keep showing all these terrible things, people will see the films and then want to shoot themselves, because this is like, life is so horrible. So we don't want to leave people with that negative feeling. We don't profess to be offering a solution for everything, but I guess that is probably a concern of each one of you as well, to be talking about the issue at hand, but at the same time not to forego the entertainment value of things, because at the end of the day we are making movies and we are in entertainment. So what I want to ask you all about a question about geo-blocking, because in the old days when you had the distribution, like theatrical especially, in the distribution contracts, it was by country, by region, by language sometimes, and so on. Now that everything is streaming and everyone can access it from everywhere, how do you put some form of orderliness into that? Or not geo-block, or not to geo-block, or how to go about it?
I think with Flixer, the platform is available worldwide. So our subscribers are from everywhere, but that's because our content is, we want our content to reach, a wide audience. We want these stories in front of people who might not have access to these stories. So that's that's why we want this to, we want Flixer to, be accessible to everybody. But in terms of the Australian landscape itself, I mean, distributors in Australia are, their headquarters are either focusing on the Asia Pacific region, so, Australia, New Zealand, and then like parts of Asia, like Hong Kong, Japan, Korea, Philippines, Asia Pacific, but also only focusing on only the Australian market, or only, Australia and New Zealand. So in terms of the geo-blocking, I think it just really depends on what the distributor, how they deal with their licensors, or how they are managing their sales, and what kind of business business deals they have in place. I think it just depends in Australia anyway.
Yeah, especially because it's different from a festival. Like in our case, we gave an option to the filmmakers to, if they wanted to, because there's situations of premiere, you see. Like in our case, for example, we have a stipulation that a film has to be at least a New York premiere for it to be considered for the competition section. And then if somebody is submitting to a festival like that has a premiere stipulation, then they don't want it to have broadcast everywhere. But they had the choice to geo-block or not to geo-block. And then at the end of the day, even if it didn't geo-block, it's only a week long, it's a festival, it's gonna end. But in your cases, it's streaming for a long time, for years sometimes. So it's important. Yeah, who would like to say something about this geo-blocking in other words, or not in other words?
Sure, go ahead, Beth, if you.
Well, I'm sure, because Jordan, it sounded like you had a rights platform, so I'll let you get into that.
Oh, sure.
I mean, just from a macro perspective, as a distributor, when we acquire the rights, usually it's after a festival run and there's been international or domestic exposure. And then when we work with platforms to put it on platforms, most of the platforms have geo-blocking. So depending on where we've negotiated rights, if it's international or domestic or US and Canada, we will block those territories with the platform. And if we have worldwide rights, at a certain stage, if we haven't sold international rights, which includes streaming, we'll open those windows on the platforms that we can. Yeah. But I'm sure Jordan has, especially since, he's done some rights management software, it sounds like it's much more valuable insights on that.
Well, I'll say that I have two different ways to look at it. I look at it from a very practical perspective, and then the political, So for me, from the practical perspective, when I'm helping filmmakers navigate to get a decent distribution deal, I find that in many ways, the filmmaker and I have to really defer to the rights infrastructure and architecture that the distribution companies will have already laid out. So that's sort of just working with the reality of how the market is now. But I would say that politically, I believe that geo-blocking should really be removed, in this romantic future. I think that, what the audience really wants is to be able to watch a film at any point, at anywhere, right? So for example, when I want to watch a film that's a French film that's only made available through the French distributor, it doesn't have distribution in the US, I can't really, as a consumer, I can't watch that film, which is a shame. I can watch that film as an industry person, and I can reach out to the sales agent and ask for a private link. But most people in the US, for example, will not know how to reach a film that maybe they read about somewhere, right? So I think that that's a political problem. I think that I see distribution as very political. Who can access what kinds of films and at what countries? What level of access do they have? So on a political perspective, I feel like, audiences should be able to watch films regardless of where the countries that the films are coming from. But practically speaking, right now in the contemporary market, I'm working with the limitations of the ideologies of the industry, right? So we can try to come up with tools to how to get around that, but it's a challenge. So I would say I would love for audiences to be able to watch films no matter what country they come from, and to not always have to wait for a distribution deal to provide it to the masses. So that's something that we're trying to get around with a platform called Cinemarket, where it allows the filmmaker to pitch their films directly to the industry. But even then, we're still working with whatever infrastructure that the distributor has currently in place, right? So, yeah, I would say ideally I would like, you know, geo-blocking to kind of go away. There are some people that are working on that. For example, there's a festival in Toronto called the Toronto Queer Film Festival, and they specifically target queer Indigenous filmmakers. So for every film that's playing this event, it will not be geo-blocked, which means that you can watch their program from wherever in the world you may be based. So I think that some people are pushing and they're making concessions because that might mean that they're not able to bring a big, you know, major mainstream commercial feature film to their program because those are going to be geo-blocked. But on the upside is that they can spotlight really independent films that maybe wouldn't normally be competing or worrying about geo-blocking. They're just worried about finding an audience, period. Yeah. So I think there are different movements happening, and I think it's kind of an exciting time to be working in that space.
It's very, very interesting what you're saying, because it's like kind of a democratization of the access to these films. And also the geo-blocking is a remnant of the old system, because in the old days, when you had the in cinema actual theatrical distribution, there was a distributor in that region whose job was to take care of the nitty-gritty of the details and so on, the marketing and the publicity and this and that. And therefore, it had to be kind of cut into geographical regions in some way or another for facilitating all that. And you couldn't just sell all the international rights and then who's doing all the job or the work. So, but then when the transfer to online platforms happened, somehow people said, oh, wait a minute, what about the rights to this country or that country? But the platform does not work in the same way. And also the fact that a lot of the platforms are non-exclusive, which brings me to the next question. Maybe you should also address this issue. Are you going to exclusive representation on your platforms, or is it open, or a filmmaker can have their films in all three of your platforms at the same time, or how does it work? Maybe Jordan will go back.
Sure, yeah. Sure. Well, functionally, the work that I do is very much like a sales agent, I would say. So functionally, I'm going out there representing an individual film and then seeing what kind of partnerships that I can build off of that film. So I would say that in that process, you know, in order to, you know, make up for the time and the outreach that you're working on for each project, it does, you know, I personally ask for the exclusive representation. But again, it really depends on, you know, where the film is at as well. It's possible that I come in at the very tail end of the timeline for a filmmaker, and maybe they already have distribution in France or another country, but not in the US, or vice versa. Maybe they have no representation. So it really depends on where they are in the pipeline. But obviously, if I'm speaking to 5 companies to pitch a film to, and somebody else is doing the same, it's very confusing. So exclusivity is important.
Yeah.
For
in
that.
your case, I can understand why, because you're also the agent, you're also the rep of that particular film. But if a film is put on a platform where it is streaming, after, let's say, you made the connection and the film went onto X platform, are they allowed to go to Y and Z platforms as well?
Are the filmmakers allowed?
Yeah.
I would say ideally they'd be able to list the films wherever, and ideally they'd be working with a distributor that has a very forward-thinking approach. But I think that the truth is that, you know, because we are living in you know, in 2021, you know, I think we're all trying to figure out how to navigate those limitations of rights, and you have to monetize each territory and each window. So we are dealing with that sort of architecture that we're sort of bound by currently. So I'll say that ideally you can find a partner that is able to somehow unlock these things in a way that where everybody wins, but that's very, very tricky. I think it's complex.
It's so new that, you know, we have to still find the language. Yes. So Erica and Beth, you want to say something about this exclusivity issue?
Beth, do you want to go?
Sure. We don't actually have a platform as we're a distributor. So when we acquire rights, usually we are exclusive for US at least, you know, or North America or potentially worldwide. You know, from a practical standpoint, there has to be some sort of exclusivity because you don't want two sets of people trying to pitch the same platform and try to get the film up. So, you know, usually a distributor takes on that responsibility. The titles that we acquire, we will go to the major platforms and offer that title for exclusive, you know, to them for an acquisition that they would acquire as a sort of as a sales agent or a distributor. You know, because obviously in the last 2 years, all the platforms have, you know, Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, in terms of the films that they actually feature, you know, really put effort behind, have all become, you know, it's all become about exclusivity for those channels to draw audiences with unique content. So we would go and you know, consider offering them the rights of the film that we acquire as an exclusive for their platform, you know, if that deal works out. There's some practical challenges with, you know, at least from our perspective. I mean, we're open to it because, again, I think, you know, the last year has sort of changed a lot of this is how we did things and let's look at how we do it. But there's some real practical challenges with the platforms and letting filmmakers go direct. Specifically, it's, you know, the ability to deliver films properly in the right formats for the, you know, I mean, like things get kicked back all the time, and, you know, you need to have the ability to provide files and captions and things that these platforms need, you know, in a way that, and for them, you know, independent filmmakers coming to them is very cumbersome, right? Because then they have to deal with people. And we as a distributors deal with filmmakers who level of expertise vary from highly technical to not technical at all, you know, and sort of interpreting that into a product that can be ingested, you know, can take a lot of resources and energy. So, I mean, that's one sort of practical aspect of sort of a distributor or a partner that helps do it, and why it can't be just totally democratized at this point. At least in my opinion. I'm not saying it won't go there and it shouldn't go there. It just, that's one of the reasons. And then, you know, it's also an accounting reason because the platforms don't want to deal with thousands and thousands and thousands of individual accounts. And, you know, so they do like having this sort of funnel that brings products to them. So that would be, you know, again, not a platform. And I guess that's my view on the exclusivity topic.
Yeah, for the two of you that are not platforms, it makes a lot of sense because you're putting all this time and energy and also investing in the career of the film. So, if, you know, and also if two people, let's say the same film that goes to Flixa, from Beth and from Jordan, she's going to say, wait a minute, who is representing, with whom should I talk? So what do you think about that, Erica?
Well, Flixa traditionally is non-exclusive. We offer our content you know, our deals with our filmmakers and our producers are non-exclusive, and the territories are worldwide. So yeah, I mean, I think that's because Flixa also is focused more on the content and wanting to get the message of the content out to our subscribers. But, you know, other platforms in Australia obviously aren't like that. And other platforms that, you know, have territories in Australia, like Netflix, for example, definitely wouldn't, you know, always want non-exclusive. And there have been, I think Amazon Prime in Australia as well have, you know, because of the, you know, the lack of cinema goers in Australia, they've had one big budget movie I can think of in particular that's gone straight to Amazon Prime as a Amazon exclusive, whereas it would normally, you know, have premiered in theaters. So it depends, but Flixa in particular is really focused more on getting the message of the content out to its to its subscribers. So it's at the moment it's non-exclusive. That's not to say that if the producer or the filmmaker wanted to make it exclusive to Flixer, that we would do that. But yeah, mostly non-exclusive for Flixer. Yeah.
There are three different things that I also want us to touch upon. Let me just throw them out there, and then maybe we can take a moment and see if somebody has asked a question that relates to what we have already been saying, so we can attach to that. One of them is deliverables, which Beth touched upon. We want to know about what's the best way a filmmaker can go about putting together their film so it's acceptable on your platforms or deliverables and all that. The other one is, how do you find your films? Each one of you, how do you come to the film that you want to be on your platform or produce or distribute or be the sales rep for? And short films, is there a big difference between the markets that are for short films and the way you approach short films, or maybe you don't do them at all? So this is another one that I would like us to touch upon. Maybe we should go for short films first, because we did documentaries, and then let's see what happens with short films. Beth?
We don't actually deal with short films, so I will pass it on.
Yes. Jordan, I don't think you do too, or do you?
No, I do. Yeah, I do. And I will say that for shorts, in my personal experience, I've seen more sales come in from the educational market than I have necessarily from the commercial market. So the difference being educational market, for anybody that's watching that may not be, know the difference, they would be an institution, a university, a library, maybe a museum, maybe a gallery, so specialized academic hubs will make these films accessible specifically for their students, faculty and staff, versus commercial, which you're talking about Amazon, Netflix, etc., right, iTunes. So I would say that shorts, I personally have had better luck selling shorts to educational institutions. The shorts that I tend to pick tend to also be socially relevant, so they will have some sort of issue, whether it's a genre film or whether it's, a documentary. So if you can find, I would say that for me, the genre or the length is not so important, as long as there is some kind of central theme that has an existing community base, then it's easier to match it with a stakeholder that cares about those issues. That's actually part of why, I was so fascinated by this festival. It's because you named it what it is, socially relevant. So for me, there's a treasure trove of films every year that will have hopefully built-in audiences, right? So I think for me, the length, for me, the format is not as important as the themes being discussed and the ability to kind of translate the film into a community that's existing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because in the PR and media and press panel a couple of days ago, we were talking and one of the panelists said, the first question I asked my filmmaker when they come to me for the promotion is, who is your film made for? Who is your target audience? And of course, they were going a little bit too drastic, and they said, and when they say everyone, I hang up. Okay, maybe we don't hang up, but we want filmmakers to think along the way of who is the target audience. And this year, part of the reason of us putting them together into different themes was partly that as well. Two reasons. One of them is because we're going on a platform where people have to find the film somewhere under some form of heading. And we thought themes would be a very good way to go about that. And the second one is because when you go with a theme, your outreach also is reflecting that theme. So Erica, you want to elaborate on
I really connect with what Jordan was saying about, the content having an inbuilt audience already when you've got those themes in there. For Flixer, for example, where we're about supporting, women filmmakers and women producers, and it's stories about women for women. So Claire, in setting up Flixer, has really built, a good library of content that supports that. And so Claire and I together now are just going to build on that content. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to hustle and, reach out to different producers.
She's interested in features too, because
correct.
The awards would be on features because you have a big selection of shorts.
Correct. Yes. And we're just going to reach out to people that we think really connect with what Flixer is about. And hopefully that will bring in not only the filmmakers that we want to represent on the platform, but also the audience that connects with that ethos as well. So
that's great. So I'm going to take a second and go over the questions. A couple of our attendees, who are mainly the filmmakers in the film festival, I must say, unless some audience member has stumbled on the link and they are interested, which we will not know. In the Q&A section, somebody was communicating with Jordan privately, and I feel like these are questions that everybody should hear. So maybe filmmakers, keep your questions public so everybody benefits. One of the questions was to Jordan: do you do the reverse, connect American filmmakers with the international market? And Jordan answered that, saying yes, with foreign sales. And then another question was, okay, this was more private, to connecting later. So that's, I'm not gonna divulge the secrets there. And then another question came in. A request. I don't know how the panelists feel about that. And if you do, please abide by that. Please put your contact information in the chat so that the filmmakers can be in touch later. And a question: what shifts have you seen in your business distribution model in the last year and going forward, which is what the topic is. We are talking about that. A distributor said yesterday most of their sales were still physical copy. Do you see that too? And another person was asking about the DVD market. Where are we with the DVD market? So we still have deliverables, and how do you find the films? But if you want to answer the question about the DVD market, and and then we can go from there.
So, I mean, as a distributor, I could address the DVD question. We still put films out on DVD. So all of our titles are, I mean, yes, I think every single title we put out is either on DVD, and we do Blu-ray. Blu-ray actually gets more, exposure in the media because there's a lot of people who are careers are oriented around Blu-ray reviews. So if you have a beautiful film and it could be on Blu-ray, then that's an added sort of publicity opportunity. We're still sort of looking at our numbers between last year and this year. So I'm, trying to figure out how, because obviously our business has been impacted by, our team has been reduced somewhat, but we're coming back up. But, so we're grappling with, how doing the sort of high level, what did last year look like to determine, I mean, but we still sold DVDs throughout this whole thing. We sell, obviously Amazon is one of our major accounts. We sell to Midwest and all the other small, but people still are, not everybody shifted to purely digital. So, again, a lot of that often can be libraries. So that probably was down. But I would say there's still a market for DVD. I don't know how long it's going to last, but it's still there. It's not all streaming. So that would hopefully answer that question.
Also, because a lot of people, like, for example, in our situation, the demographics are generally on an older generation demographics. And a lot of people don't feel so comfortable in putting their emails and signing in and giving away all their details because they have to stream a film. Instead, it's a lot easier for them to receive the DVD, put it in the DVD player, just sit down and watch it. So maybe there is still, yeah. And Erica, you also have the DVDs?
Well, Flix obviously is a streaming, but in general, anecdotally, last year, DVD sales in Australia was pretty good. I think a lot of people were surprised by, you know, how well it's done. And I think, you know, DVD sales were, yeah, everyone thought that everyone would be going to streamers, but not everyone did. And, you know, the home ent teams in various, you know, distribution companies were, you know, still working their butts off trying to, like, you know, restock and deal with their suppliers. I mean, and deal with their suppliers, deal with the, you know, the stores. So it's been surprising. I think it's the same thing about, yeah, what you were saying, Nora, that a lot of people are still wary of, you know, this online streaming. Yeah. And I think, yeah. And I think now also with some content being removed from streamers, different episodes for whatever reason, you know, content that's no longer acceptable. Some people, I mean, are just out of the curiosity factor, will probably buy a whole season of, you know, a particular program just so they can get that one episode that was removed from Netflix, or, you know, get a catalog of films because it was removed from a streaming platform. So there's that as well. Yeah.
And Jordan, you're also in, you have the DVD.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Erica and Beth. I've seen, for example, that DVDs, Blu-rays, physical media are also a little bit easier for libraries in the US at least to track. And they can, strangely, they can also maybe be more democratic in a way, because not every library has had the resources or funds to completely overturn their entire collections into digital format, right? So I think a lot have in the US. And I'm not familiar, for example, in the Sydney, you know, how the libraries operate, if they're public or, but
yeah, a lot of them are public, yeah.
But because not every collection is digitized, again, the well-funded institutions are, but there's a lot of libraries that are not. Physical is still quite an asset. So in some ways, I see that as being important.
Actually, we do have a question about the same theme, but I guess we covered it. What do you think of physical DVD distribution, and is it still important, or has the DoD replaced it? And we pretty much answered it. Unless
anecdotally, which I find fascinating, sorry to interrupt, is that there's actually a shortage of the polycarbonate that's used to make the DVDs. So our orders have all played, because I mean, I don't know if it went into like manufacturing shields. I mean, I don't really know enough about polycarbonate plastics to, you know, say anything, but you know, we're hearing from our manufacturer, they're like, we can't get our hands on the, and I'm like, hey. So it just in that whole, you know, like COVID pipeline of things that you have to deal with, that's, you know, one of them. So if your DVD orders are delayed, that would be why.
So you see, it's very interesting aspects that we don't necessarily think about, because we've become so used to clicking on and streaming. Well, we are quickly running short of time. And I must also say that right after this back to back, it was not a good idea to schedule it like that, Jordan. I guess we missed the point there, but we will manage. We have, Jordan is going to do the one-on-one consultations from 3:30 to 5 o'clock. And we have to log out of this platform and go to the other Zoom meeting. But yeah, you want to say something about how you find your films? Like you go to the major festivals, or filmmakers send you a sample or a DVD, or how does it work for each one of you? How do you spot the filmmakers you want to work with?
I'll go quickly. Pre-COVID, you know, different sales reps or agents would come to us, individuals would come to us who've heard about other films that we released, or it's in the same vein. You know, people email us out of the blue. But usually it's through, you know, a sales rep who's seen it at a festival and is bringing it to us.
And Jordan?
I have seen a lot of stuff through the film festival pipeline. So I also do some scouting for festivals, and some programming. So in that process of looking for, to support festival programming, I'll run across a lot of films as well.
And Erica?
Yeah, same. Claire and I will either be, contacted out of the blue by various filmmakers or producers, or otherwise, yeah, we would contact people that we would want to connect with that, yeah, have, the same, are about what Flixer is about. So, yeah.
So this is very, very interesting. Of course, this is a topic that we can keep talking about because there are always new platforms. One last round, and if you guys want to talk about a new trend that maybe is catching on, or the business is, of course, that's a big can of worms to open in the last 2 minutes, but if you want to say in a nutshell.
Erica, you go first.
Okay, thanks, Beth. I think one of the trends, especially, now that we're in our second year of COVID, I think we've all had the chance to reflect on what the world was coming to and where it was going to go had we not been shut down. I think we're all more about, understanding the world better and getting more of a handle on how different communities are experiencing the world, and their experiences are different to ours. And this is where film comes into play. We, open those worlds up to other people. And, having said that, that's where platforms like Flixer come in. So, yeah, I think audiences are, yes, there'll probably still be reality TV. And yes, we'll still be watching Marvel movies, but, there's a real need for content that speaks about things that matter. So, yeah, I mean, that's not so much a trend as, it is a trend, but it's more about, this is where we want to be right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good news for us.
Yeah.
And my dream is that instead of becoming the exception, the socially relevant films become the norm. And I used to go to the Cannes Marché. You've all been and seen, you get all these incredible violence, guns and violence movies and so on. And I'm going like, now it's going to be totally different. And we can't even get to Cannes now. So it's totally different. Yes. Yeah. And who wants to say something about that?
I would just say really quickly that I'm hoping for a closer relationship between the film industry and the rest of all other industries and the rest of the world too, because I think in many ways we're asking for a lot of industry change, but then when we look around the world, we see that there's still so many political situations and problems that we have, and we don't always connect that we are one industry that is working, not in a bubble, that we work, everything that happens in our industry is a result of everything that's happening in the world on a social level. So for me, I think we need to realize that we need to work in tandem as industry people in this industry that with events around the world, and we should always keep an open line of communication with different things that are happening around us.
Yeah. And there.
Jordan, sounds so hopeful, and I'm going to end on a negative note. Our biggest concern, or what we're seeing is sort of the stream, especially here in the States, the streamers have gotten so powerful, and obviously the censorship that they're implementing and deplatforming is of concern. And in particular, like I mentioned earlier, that shutting off documentaries is, has huge ramifications for filmmakers. Most people could get their films on Amazon and have people see them and find some sort of monetization. It's the biggest marketplace in the world. And so throttling that on documentary filmmakers, is truly concerning, to us as distributors, but also as, filmmakers. So we don't know what the resolution is on that yet. They send out forms to say, they recently sent out we received a, automated marketing input form from them. They're like, do you think Amazon is friendly to filmmakers? You're like, really?
No.
But anyways, so just don't use my name in Amazon, right? Yeah. Anyway, so that is concerned, but really the deplatforming and censorship is definitely, I think we're going to see more of that, which we of course you know, don't find it to be terrible, because a lot of the films that we do release sometimes ride that border of what people would, you know, unilaterally, because they're using AI to determine all these things. So there's no gray areas of saying, well, but it's really arguing this and not that. So, you know, it's hard for someone whose world orientation and the people who are making these decisions aren't necessarily in the same culture to be able to recognize the nuances of the language or the experiences, you know, and they just are like, you know, I mean, we've had, anyways, I could go on and on about the sort of things that we've seen. So
no, this is a very important topic because it concerns us all. It concerns the consumer, it concerns the festival, it concerns the manufacturer, the filmmaker, everybody. The whole chain is affected by what's going on, and the whole world is affected by what's going on, like you say, Jordan. And the film industry is a part of everything that's being affected. So I have to end, unfortunately. We're already 2 minutes over, and we have to close so that we can jump on the other call with Jordan and hopefully figure out who's going to be your first. One person had requested, because they are in the United Arab Emirates and it's a long haul away. So we'll figure out everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to meet you.
Knowledge and your experience on the platform for the benefit of us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.